not. I'm trying to work out whether I'm the Walmart act for the chief rabbi, or I'm not quite in his league oratorically, or actually in his league in any sense. But I'll try and do my best this evening. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation. The invitation actually originally came through Wendy Pater, who I think is a member of the synagogue here, and whose nephew, I think I've got that correct, Richard, is the head of BICOM's Jerusalem office. So he's one of my colleagues. He's made Aliyah. He lives over there in Israel, so it's kind of nice to have that personal connection here. What I'm going to do is a quick run through an overview of the challenges facing Israel at the moment. A lot of them you'll probably be aware of through media coverage, but I think it's worth kind of recapping just so we get our heads around the seriousness of the situation. Though obviously when you look back historically, at any point during the 64 years of the state of Israel, I could have come along and said that the situation was serious, but there are some particular issues that we need to focus in on. And then the second half, which I'll probably do a lot faster, is just to talk about some of the ways in which grassroots people in the community and beyond the community can help respond to that. The little bit that we can each do to help Israel deal with some of those challenges, and I'm hoping to leave some time at the end for some questions. So if we go on to the slide, so there are actually some internal challenges as well, but I didn't want to talk about those because I don't think it's my role, particularly as a non-Jew, to start talking about the internal politics of Israel and getting us all into a debate about who we would vote for if we had a vote in the general election on the 22nd of January. That would be fascinating, but it might chew up an entire evening. So I'm concentrating on the external stuff, and I've just listed the six there. We start with the most dangerous one, with Iran. Can we have the next slide? So the International Atomic Energy Authority, their report has made it clear that the threat of Iran developing nuclear weapons is not some kind of PR exercise by the Israelis. This is something that the recognised international authority has declared that there's a real threat that the Iranian nuclear program is heading in that direction. Unlike all the other threats that I'm talking about today, this is an existential threat to Israel's existence. So Israel faced existential conventional military threats when it was first founded as a nation, and right through to 1973 it dealt with those 3-4 times. The IDF saw those off. You've now got a threat. If Iran developed nuclear weapons, Israel is only a small country. You wouldn't have to have very many nuclear bombs to present a real threat to the whole population and to the Palestinians, who have clocked onto this, that they live rather in too close proximity for Iran lobbing nuclear weapons about to be a good idea. And it's also a threat because if there's a country in the region, a hostile country in the region with nuclear weapons, it constrains Israel's ability to deal with all kinds of other threats. In rather the same way that the Soviets in 67 and 73 said to the Israelis, you can't go as far as Damascus, we're the nuclear umbrella for the Syrians. Well, the Iranians could start playing the same role in constraining Israel from dealing with conventional threats as well. So it's a double threat. The sanctions are getting tougher, but are they going to be enough? It's quite difficult to work out what's going on inside Iranian society, whether the economic sanctions are actually biting enough. And Iran is approaching a zone of immunity, is the phrase that I think Ehud Barak came up with, the phrase zone of immunity, meaning they get to a certain point and they've actually got a nuclear deterrent, so you can't take action against them. And there are points before that where they've got far enough with their centrifuges and depleted uranium or whatever. I'm not an expert, as you can tell. I've probably already used the wrong words. I'm not a nuclear physicist, but they get to a certain point in the program and they can get the stuff into a bunker under a mountain, and they've developed it enough that whatever you've destroyed, that they've got the raw material that they need. And Prime Minister Netanyahu told the UN with the I'm not sure whether it was a great gimmick or a rather naff one, when he did the cartoon of the bomb with the fuse in the top and drew a red line across it, and he was saying they'll reach that red line where in the second or third quarter of next year. So it's not that far off. It's slightly further off than we thought because of intelligence about what the Iranians have done with the nuclear materials that they've got. So people were talking about this autumn, and now it's moved to next spring or summer. There's a big problem in terms of the relationship with the US. The US has a different timetable because although the IDF is a very incredibly capable military, it's nowhere near the scale of the American armed forces. So the Americans can take military action later than Israel can do by itself. So there's a whole debate about does Israel need to act unilaterally by itself, or is it prepared to kind of take the gamble that the Americans would do stuff later down the track when they become the only people that can take action. Risks: it could trigger a regional war if Israel and or the US took military action against the Iranian nuclear program. And as part of that, the Iranians could strike back asymmetrically. There's a conventional military attack by the Israelis or the Americans against Iranian nuclear targets, and they fight back by getting all the terrorist organisations, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas and the other small ones in Gaza, to fire up all the rockets that they've got. It's to an even greater extent than they've done in the last few days. Daniel Taub, the ambassador here, has a copy of a leaflet that he shows people. There's a civil defence leaflet in Israel that shows a map with rings going into the country, and I think the maximum you've got is about 3 minutes to get into a shelter from a rocket attack if you're furthest away from the Lebanese border and the Gaza border, right up close. It's 20 seconds or something. You just haven't got it's literally duck under the nearest piece of cover. And far from Israel being gung-ho about this, any kind of detailed understanding of the situation, there's a top-level debate that goes right up to cabinet ministers and the military chiefs and the security chiefs, and it's a very finely balanced, very serious debate. I don't think there's anyone in Israel who is just like, yeah, we should go in and deal with the Iranians now. Everyone recognises that you have to balance the potential threats on both sides, the threats of inaction versus the risk caused by action, and that's a kind of serious ongoing debate. So I don't think it's kind of settled in stone that the Israelis will take action unilaterally. Second area of threat, if we move on to the next slide, is what was merrily called the Arab Spring. And I have to admit, I kind of bought into the euphoria at the start of 2011 at the overthrow of dictatorships, and some places it's worked out better than others. Libya, for instance, the Islamists didn't win the elections, but in other parts of the Arab world, it's looking more like an Islamist winter than an Arab Spring. So some very dark. You had kind of years of repression under dictators like Mubarak, and then some very dark extremist forces who were boiling away under the surface and have come out into the open since those dictatorships collapsed. Syria, we've got a civil war that appears to be sectarian in nature between different religious groups, and risks overspill. In the last couple of days, we've had mortar shells landing in the Golan Heights, and the way you read the BBC reports, you would think that it was Israel was the one lobbing stuff in the opposite direction. Actually, they've just fired warning shots to kind of remind the Syrians exactly where their civil war stops. And it's difficult to tell the true nature of the opposition. There are clearly some very unpleasant extremist forces buried within the opposition. It's difficult to tell how dominant they are and whether there are good people in there in the opposition as well, because clearly the government of Syria, or what's left of the government of Syria, the Assad regime, were never friends of Israel and indulged in all kinds of anti-Semitic rhetoric as well. And Egypt, you've had an election with a very alarming result, government by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a, inverted commas, moderate Islamist party. I'm not quite sure what that's going to turn out to mean. And an even more extreme Islamist grouping, the Salafists, came second. Once that government beds in, does that bring a risk to the peace treaty that for the last 30 plus years has meant that Israel hasn't had to worry about its southern border? And already you've got a situation where the kind of collapse of the dictatorship in Egypt means that the Sinai Desert is in a state of complete anarchy, and being all kinds of terrorist groups and just common criminal groups are using it as a base. And there's a risk there that the Egyptians might demand that they remilitarise the Sinai as part of getting on top of the chaos there. And then Jordan, which has been the most peaceable and amenable of Israel's immediate neighbours for 30 years, also looking unstable. Some very dangerous kind of dynamics in society there about the authority of the monarchy still to rule the country. Third one, in terms of threats, going to the south, to Gaza, where again winning an election, which is tough for me to. I spent all my life arguing for democracy, and then you get democratic outturns that produce authoritarian or extremist rule, and people who kind of want to fight one election and then not have any more elections after that. So you had Hamas win an election in Gaza, and then even they are being outflanked by more extremist organisations such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Popular Resistance Committees. So even if Hamas didn't want to fire off any rockets, can they actually control these smaller, more radical groups? They seem to be tied up more directly with Iran, despite them being Sunnis rather than Shiites like the Iranians. More sophisticated weaponry, so the IDF Jeep that was blown up, and it was by an anti-tank missile, and also the school bus that was attacked last year, that was an anti-tank missile fired at a very obvious yellow school bus. Luckily not full, only one, from memory, there's one kid that was injured, but a kind of willingness to attack indiscriminately obvious civilian targets using sophisticated military weaponry. And it doesn't take a genius to work out they're probably getting that from Iran. It's come from somewhere, and Iran is probably the source. And the unilateral withdrawal that was hopefully from Gaza, that was supposed to be a step towards peace. Instead, there's been more attacks, and this most recent bout happening right as we speak. I don't think I've seen anything yet that a ceasefire has stuck, though that it might have happened very recently. 160 plus rockets, so people in Sterot and areas around there, just a constant sirens going off. Kids growing up with all traumatised because the whole time they're having to kind of run for cover. Quite an adult suffering psychological effects of living under that kind of fire as well. Again, people outside, you guys all know this because I'm pretty sure almost all of you have got relatives or friends living in Israel. You go out to the people that rely on what sadly, for its quality of writing, though not its authoritativeness. The Guardian, still the newspaper I buy in the mornings. If I only relied on that, or if I only relied on the BBC, you would think that this was all about kind of Israeli heavy-handed aggression. You would see hardly anything to explain the scale of this kind of attack. 160 plus rockets in a geographically very small country, and the rockets are kind of creeping northwards in terms of the sophistication and range that they've got. and getting nearer and nearer to very major population centres where the bulk of the population of Israel is. And sadly, if Israel does what it sometimes might need to do and attack the rocket site, you get a kind of international backlash diplomatically and in terms of the media and the street protests and stuff, where everyone forgets who started this and accuses Israel of being the aggressor. Fourth one, continued terrorist threat. The security barrier worked. If you look at a graph of the suicide bombings, it fell off the edge of a cliff once the security barrier was built. So if anyone has a go at you about what's the fence or the wall or whatever they want to call it, what's it done? It has saved lives of innocent civilians, of people who were being massacred in pizza restaurants or at Friday night dinners in hotels or whatever. Those people are safer now than they were. But you've got a new front in terms of the southern border of Sinai, where you had a crossover from this kind of anarchic region and attacks across the border. And Hezbollah is now getting into international terrorism again, having been very internally focused in Lebanon. They're now kind of spreading out back into Europe and looking for soft Israeli and Jewish targets outside of, and this is kind of, the Iranians are behind Hezbollah. And you saw this with the bombing of the airport buses in Bulgaria, and there was an attack before that in Cyprus. It's taken until number 5 before we get to what everyone tells us is the heart of the problems in the Middle East, which is the relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The peace process, I don't think it's unfair to say it's stuck at the moment. There hasn't been an initiative for a while, and you're beginning to see an academic narrative and a political narrative about, is the idea of a two-state solution, 2 states for 2 peoples, dead? I think that's premature to start saying that, and it's very dangerous, because if you don't have a 2-state solution, the alternative is some kind of fantasy binational state. I just have no idea how that would work. Belgium doesn't work as a binational state between the very kind of peaceable Flemings and Walloons who haven't been at war since when it was a Spanish colony or whatever. So I'm not quite sure how 2 peoples who both aspire to nationhood and have been in conflict for 64 years or plus, because there was conflict before the foundation of the state, how they're supposed to form this kind of cosy Canada or Switzerland style binational state. Or the other alternative, if you don't have a 2-state solution, is that the demographics would mean that you had an Arab majority and a Jewish minority ruling over them. So all the pernicious stuff that the anti-Israel people talk about apartheid, it would actually look something like that. Both of them imply that not having a Jewish and democratic state, which I think would be a disaster. So I think we've got to kind of stick a flag in the ground and say with the 2-state solution isn't dead. The sticking points are familiar. You could spend all night talking about the detail of whether settlements are the core of the problem, or how many settlements would need to become part of Israel under any deal and how many don't, whether the Palestinians have got a full right of return or a limited right of return, exactly what happens to which bits or all of East Jerusalem. There's far too much detail to go into here, but I think the whole world that follows this stuff is familiar with where the points of disagreement are. The problem with the fact that there aren't multilateral initiatives, that people aren't getting around the table, is the Palestinians are starting to do things unilaterally, which is very dangerous to start doing things without negotiation, and they're going to push for a vote on non-member status of the UN on the 29th of November, and the mathematics at the General Assembly, which is stacked with large numbers of countries that just automatically vote anti-Israel. I think we kind of know what the result of that vote is likely to be. There was a speech by President Abbas, I forget whether it's President or Prime Minister Abbas, Abu Mazen, the PA leader last week, which indicated a bit of flexibility on the 1967 borders and a bit of flexibility on the right of return. But you don't know how, the more steps he takes towards a more consensual position, you don't know whether his grassroots are going to react very badly and how much control has it actually got over the situation. And I guess if I was going to be a cynic, I'd say maybe this is connected to the Israeli general election and is trying to indicate to the Israeli electorate that they can go somewhere to the left of Bibi. The lack of progress in terms of the peace process fuels all the boycotters, and so it's like when we track in BICON the percentage opinion about Israel and Palestine and the Palestinians in the UK, most people don't care. Or don't know, or don't understand, or think kind of playing on both your houses. Usually about 10 or 12% feel warm towards the Israelis, 16%-ish towards the Palestinians, which is actually reasonably evenly balanced. The Palestinian score ticks up, and the Israeli score ticks down whenever there's a crisis in the region, like Kharkiv or Lebanon, and the Israeli score goes up a little bit, and the Palestinian score begins to match up with by going down a bit whenever the peace process moves forward. So people in Britain, like the international community as a whole, feels warmer towards Israel when it looks like there's some prospect of a deal. Sixth challenge, if we go on to the next one, is the one that's most pernicious. It's not really existential. It's the one we can do something about, and the one that probably we day to day see most of here. So delegitimization of Israel's right to exist as a state. And Arab regimes, their hostilities really gone through three phases. First of all, they tried war, and it turned out that their conscript, Soviet-trained, Soviet-armed armies were useless compared to the IDF. And the IDF has kept that technological and military and morale edge. So unless they're completely stupid, which they could be, I don't think they're going to try conventional warfare again. Second phase was terrorism, which tends to damages the Israeli morale, damages Israel in terms of people's the psychological effects as well as the human cost and the economic cost, but it doesn't really win very many friends on the global stage. In fact, it tends to be completely counterproductive. Third phase is cleverer and more pernicious, which is a global intellectual and media campaign to delegitimize Israel, to try and isolate it in the international community, to bring in boycotts, both individuals boycotting Israel, eventually states boycotting Israel, and then sanctions as actually applying economic kind of punishment to Israel. And they basically lifted this straight from the anti-apartheid movement, which I get very angry about, because I've come out of, I'm part of the centre-left in politics, so I'm just about old enough that as a kid I can remember being very inspired by the anti-apartheid movement. And the idea that people are telling me that by supporting Israel and supporting the right of Jewish people to have their own state, that makes me somehow a supporter of apartheid, it makes my blood boil. And so literally every aspect of the anti-apartheid campaign, which was about a minority white police state ruling it over a black majority, horrific human rights abuses, no democracy, every aspect of that campaign they kind of lift it and do a pastiche version against Israel. And we'll come to some of the tactics in a second. BDS, boycott, disinvestment and sanctions, which is the name they've given their campaign. To date, it has been a massive failure. in practical terms. So UK-Israel bilateral trade went up by 34% last year. So this is not having an economic impact on Israel. It's politically annoying. It's very hurtful both to Israelis and to the Jewish population, which are friends of Israel here. But you can kind of rest assured that it isn't damaging Israel economically. But we shouldn't underestimate that these things are important, the kind of intellectual climate, the media climate. You can't go on forever with people kind of chiselling away at your legitimacy as a country. If we go on to the next slide, I haven't got time to go through all of these, but some of the recent examples, you've got trade unions going as far as Unison actually stopping a peace negotiator, a guy from the left in Israel, Moti Christel, who's a peace negotiator, stopping him coming and teaching people about negotiation skills in the NHS in Manchester. Big legal case going to happen there. That is, to my mind, banning an individual from working on something because they happen to be an Israeli citizen. That's racist, and I hope that that's what the court is going to find. We've got the co-op groups and the country's fifth largest or sixth largest supermarket chain boycotting goods from 4 Israeli companies because some of their produce is sourced from the settlements. They're actually boycotting all of their produce, wherever it comes from. We've got the Methodists and the Quakers using this kind of BDS language. We've got attempts to stop Veolia from winning bin collection contracts from councils because Veolia had a small share in the tram in Jerusalem. So apparently, when you read the boycott literature, apparently providing a nice modern tram that helps Arabs and Jews get to work or get to the shops, that constitutes, I think the phrasing was, complicity in war crimes. And it's just, some of the language in this is insane. You would think that they were actually making cattle prods or machine gun bullets or something, and this is a company that's basically providing public services that are used by both communities. EcoStream, this there's a shop in Brighton where SodaStream have got a new kind of green product. Don't ask me exactly how it works, but they could have done a little bit of due diligence because they decided, we'll go and open our only shop front in the world in Brighton because this is a green product and there's a green council and a green MP there. So they didn't really check out what the UK Green Party's stance was towards Israel. So you've got people stood outside that shop chanting horrific kind of anti-Israel stuff, trying to shut the shop down, basically. Cultural boycotts, so people disrupting theatre performances by Habima and Batsheva dance troupe being disrupted. If anyone still wants to go, to try and make sure the audience is as full of people that actually will appreciate different cultures as possible rather than disrupt it. The London performances are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at Sadler's Wells, and I think we might still be able to get tickets online on the Sadler's Wells website. And then all this other kind of stuff around Apartheid Week, marches to Palestine that have kind of been flops, flotillas that have been deliberately provocative, and then a big, huge call célèbre over the way in which the IDF has responded. Fly-tillers, which is people flying into Ben Gurion Airport with the deliberate intention of kind of winding up the security guys there. Who's behind all this in the UK? The PSC, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, that's their logo. That's what they think Palestine is. And quite often they chant at demos, Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea. I can't see where they're saying the state of Israel is in there. So there doesn't seem to be any recognition of 2 states and 2 peoples in the PSC's logo. And when you read what they're about, they're very ambiguous about the eventual outcome that they're seeking. There are some people in there that don't come from an extremist political milieu, that are kind of coming to it from a Christian standpoint or whatever, but the core activists are a weird alliance of the old far left so various different Trotskyist or Stalinist organisations, working with Islamist groups who they probably disagree with on every other issue other than the Middle East. But the thing is that those people are quite unsavoury and quite obviously extremists, and actually the kind of best argument against these guys is, look at the Heinz 57 varieties that support them. They're working very hard in civil society organisations like trade unions, political parties, churches, student unions, to kind of reach out to a broader audience, to seize control, often of not very well attended meetings, and kind of get a wedge effect into wider civil society. So those are the challenges facing Israel. What's our challenge as supporters of Israel? Oh, that's even got a bit of animation, which for some reason that logo, I took it out of a presentation that Jeremy Newmark from the Jewish Leadership Council does, and I've never been able to get rid of the way that it flies across the centre of the screen. He's a lot cleverer with this stuff than I am. So what's our challenge? Well, if we go on to the next slide, it's that actually what the other side has done in seizing control of the policy of some of these bigger organisations shows that grassroots pressure works. Historically, really the strategy of pro-Israel people in the UK was kind of, well, if we've got a good relationship with the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, everything will be okay. And for a long time it perhaps was, but that underestimated the extent to which those top politicians come under pressure from within their parliamentary parties, and their MPs come under pressure from what their constituents tell them. So you can't ignore the grassroots, because eventually it does percolate through below. And we, in the past, under-resourced what we did at grassroots level, which meant that the Palestine Solidarity Campaign had an open run at some of these civil society organisations. No one even stood up to argue against them. For instance, at some trade union meetings, we just weren't there, or we thought that we could just ignore it and it didn't matter. And they changed those policies. I would say, for any of you that weren't aware of the work that the Union of Jewish Students do, you would think that the National Union of Students would be the worst place for this stuff. Actually, because UJS have always organised for the last 30 years and have built alliances, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm involved in this kind of stuff, is they make friends with lots of people at a student level. The student union movement in the UK actually has a reasonably sensible politics on this, and managed to keep it off the agenda at their conferences in a way in which some of the other organisations don't. So it kind of does show if you do get stuck in there and organise, you can stop it. But we're talking about a small number of vocal people that were able to switch the policy of very large organisations by just kind of browbeating them, by going in and being terribly passionate. No one's passionate back. And everyone just goes, oh, well, they care about it so much, they're shouting about it. They must be right. If we go on to the next slide, if the grassroots noise, if it's not counteracted, MPs and other decision makers think they're operating in an overwhelmingly anti-Israel climate. So Andrew Dismore, who was the MP for Hendon during Cast-Led, who was a big supporter of Israel, has said that the postbag he received during that crisis in Hendon, which has probably got the biggest Jewish population in the UK, was overwhelmingly hostile. And it wasn't until afterwards that anyone wrote and said thanks. And it would have been really useful to him in the House of Commons to have letters from his constituents so that he could have evidenced the fact that there was grassroots support for Israel's position. When I was over at the AIPAC conference, the big pro-Israel conference in the States, the British ambassador to the US, we had a meeting with him, and he said, oh, this is quite interesting to meet people who are pro-Israel, because we don't hear much from your side of the argument at the Foreign Office. He said, we've got a third of all the posts they get at the Foreign Office is about Israel and Palestine, and I can't get the exact measurements right, but he kind of implied there was a stack down like that from our side of the argument, and a stack like that from the other side. And these are all letters that are being forwarded on by MPs that have got them from their constituents. So if anyone says, oh, why do you keep being asked to write letters, it's really important. Decision makers actually they have limited ways in which they can tell where public opinion is. It's not the be all and end all of shaping policy, because clearly you would think they would look at national self-interest or perhaps even morality every now and then to decide, but they do look at how many letters they get as well. And just to give you an example of something I was involved in recently that shows that grassroots pressure works, I went up to Manchester, Co-op National Headquarters. We had a little team of 12 or 15 people stood outside their headquarters for just 1 hour, so it wasn't a big effort, and their senior management came out and gave us a private meeting that for months previously they had refused to see us. So just someone being a bit in your face and kind of brave and doing the kind of activist things that the other side can annoy us with. I'm not saying doing it on the same scale and certainly not with the same tone as them, but it can make a difference. The solution, we need to take people on a bit of a journey into more activity. So the mass of the community and supporters outside the community, we need to just get people politically active in the sense of high turnout in elections, which the Jewish community is pretty good at already, signing petitions, that kind of thing. Then we want to take people that might already sign a petition into being activists in the sense that they can do it from their desk at home or their armchair at home, writing letters to the press and to stakeholders, people like politicians, staying informed of the issues, but I'll say a little bit about how informed. And then we want to take people that are already at that level of activity to be rather more active. And it would only take, say, 5, 6 people in this room to be a bit more, to be publicly visible. I'm sorry that you may already have a team of people that do this, but if you've got half a dozen people, it keeps everyone's morale up, and that group of people can actually meet local MPs, councillors, take a lead, make public statements to the local media, and then actually you're already outgunning anything that, particularly in Heartsby, that's far more resource than the other side of the argument would be needing to put. We've got allies. There are people like me who are secular political supporters of Israel. There are more of us than you think. A lot of the people that I know in my own party, in the Tory party as well, who aren't Jewish, who don't have any religious reason to support Israel, they just believe that it's a good country trying to do the right thing in a difficult region and it's a democracy that should be supported, are just waiting to be asked to do something. And often people assume there are no allies, so you don't reach out to local people that are politically active and ask them to be supported. And then some of our Christian friends provide amazing levels of support. The recent petition I did about the co-op, we got more signatures from Orkney than we got from Harrow, and more signatures from Merthyr Tydfil than we got from Hertfordshire, and more from Northern Ireland than we got from Manchester. So there are bunches of people who, for faith reasons, but Christian faith reasons rather than Jewish faith reasons, are very passionate supporters, and we need to tap into those networks a bit more. Things you can do. I'm conscious that I'm kind of running short of time. We'll go on to the next one. In case something kicks off with Iran or Gaza, have in place some kind of, just one side of A4 that says how the community will react, who puts the messages out, who leads the response at a local level with this synagogue. Make sure you've got the widest possible email list so you can tell people what's happening, forward on emails from people like BICOM or from We Believe or Zionist Federation, whoever puts out information or calls to action, that you can circulate it to everyone. And don't assume that everyone in the community is following this and knows why Israel has done whatever it has to do. You need to kind of spell things out to people in reasonably basic terms. Next slide. Map who all the stakeholders are, looking actually at the councillors and MP in this patch. I kind of think that probably you've got good relationships there anyway, unless I've totally misread the situation, but I'm pretty sure there are some of those other kind of civic society groups that you may not have had any contact with, and kind of building some connections and contact with them when times aren't so stressful will mean that they answer the phone and you can have a civilised conversation with them when things do get bad in the region. We go on to the next slide. Keep an eye on any local activity that's being done in terms of boycott stuff, and respond in a proportionate way. Whenever there's stuff in the local press that's hostile to Israel, or local radio call-in shows, make sure you respond to that. There's a Palestine Solidarity Campaign lobby of Parliament on the 28th of November. It's a good idea to make sure that your MP knows who it is that might be asking to see him. And there's actually one that our side of the argument does in January, organised by the ZF and Christian Friends of Israel. So it's a joint Jewish-Christian thing where people can just go to the House of Commons and ask to see their MP and talk to them about the positive case for Israel. So I'd encourage people to go on that. Very easy one to do: go into shops, buy Israeli goods and products, ask for them if you can't see them. Go to Israeli cultural events when they come to London or anywhere near here. Talk to non-Jewish neighbours and colleagues. Again, when times aren't so difficult, so that when things do get difficult, you've they've already got an understanding of why it is that you support Israel. If we go on to the, this is a kind of key point I wanted to say. Keep the arguments really simple. So when I say it's about numbers, I mean it's about everyone in this room, say, writing a 2-line letter rather than one person writing 3 sides of A4. And it's about having really basic, clear arguments. People get intimidated out of this because they think, oh, you need a PhD in Middle East history, and you've got to understand the difference between the Balfour Declaration and the San Remo Agreement, or you've got to know exactly where the Green Line runs to get into these kind of arguments. Well, you don't. You've got to, the other side don't necessarily know all of that. The politicians and decision makers they're interested in the state of public opinion, not in kind of mastermind on the Middle East, browbeating them. They just want to know how many of their constituents have which view on this. So it's a numbers game. Obviously you need to explain why you've got the position that you have, but keep it at first principles. And very importantly, think about who your audiences are, and target the arguments at them. So if you're talking to a local trade union branch or whatever, make centre-left progressive arguments about Israel. If you're talking to the local Conservative Party, you can make more centre-right arguments. But you kind of don't say things you don't believe, but always think about the audience and what it is that they are interested in that might appeal to them in Israel's story. The last few slides, if we go very quickly, like at absolute top speed to them. So this is just kind of how can we. That one is obvious stuff about staying united, and I'm sure that it's kind of, if you've got differences of opinion about Israel, its government and stuff, don't let that get in the way of the message to the outside world of support for the kind of basic principles of what the state of Israel is about. You can have those arguments over the dinner table or at meetings like this, but kind of don't let them make you fall out. That's kind of almost more of a message for the Jewish community at a national level. Because sometimes when you read the JC, you'd think it was all about different factions inside Judaism in the different political strands of opinion. And actually, although those arguments are profound and they're really important, and the Jewish community loves a good argument and is good at arguing, and that's because it's a profoundly democratic community, sometimes it can get in the way of presenting a kind of united front about the basics of Israel as a democratic Jewish state. If we go on to the last few, how we believe in Israel can help. I'm going to hand round a little sign-up sheet. If anyone wants to be on an email list from me, I try and keep it to a maximum of, say, 1 email a week, where I give people 3 things if anything interesting is happening in the region, and also just kind of ask people to do very basic stuff, like if there's something that we need a letter writing campaign done on. It would be fantastic to. Oh, this is where I wish that I had. Let's see if the ink lasts in this one, which looks as though it's going to run out. Yeah, sorry. Oh, pens are going around. So that's just an example of an email that we sent out. We do some very basic leaflets that you can download off our website. So there's a local meeting where you need to take some information along. We've done stuff that half a dozen different leaflets that we hope work quite well with different organisations. If we go on to the next slide, that's the website, which has got loads of resources and information on it. So I hope people will look at that, which is webelieveInIsrael.org.uk. All of this you don't kind of need to remember, because if you sign up on there, the first thing I'll do tomorrow is write you and give you the web address. And I'll also give you a thing called there's an activist toolkit that we've got that's got lots of ideas about things that you can do at a local level. I think that's the final slide, and I've probably where's the chairman gone? I think I've probably far exceeded my time, but I hope I've kind of given people a kind of checklist of what the worrying things are going on in the region, and also a little bit of hope and inspiration that there is stuff that we can do at a local level that will make a difference. Have we got time to take a few questions, or do you need to break it up?
I know that you've got to get to Bushey Station in about 20 minutes or so. So if anybody we've got time for a couple of questions.
Yeah. And I'm not going to go around my sign-up list or my stick with the computer.
We'll send those on to you, the sign-up list, I think. Yes, sorry, the gentleman at the back. Yeah, what was the response to the co-op management team when you went to see them?
They wriggled because we put stuff to them that they really hadn't thought of. So, for instance, they were surprised when we said, "Why are you building your ethical policy on the UN's decisions when the UN takes political decisions? Why don't you have an objective set of ethical criteria that are actually about human rights rather than about UN resolutions?" And they're wriggling around trying to find other examples of boycotts that they've got. So apparently there's some Moroccan sardine manufacturer canners that they don't use, and Nagorno-Karabakh they started citing. So they're kind of on the back foot, and we managed to get people to go along to a very large number of their area meetings, and they were getting flustered. So we don't expect to change their policy overnight, because it took 10 years for the BDS people to get to where they've got to. But we think we've drawn a line in the sand that they're not going to push any further, that we're getting a distinct message. In fact, they've pretty much said in writing, we won't push it beyond these 4 companies. So I think they got a wake-up call, and they've said to people at the area meetings, we're surprised how angry the response is. They had assumed there was only one set of people that was passionate about this, and that the Jewish community and other friends kind of hit back and did it through their own democratic structures as well. They're like, we've got members that have the opposite view, we never knew this. So it's a shame that we didn't wise up to that 5 years ago, but we are where we started.